and coming out to Killen and Bassett's, and I want to thank Chris and Kevin for hosting so that we could have this conversation with Connecticut's farmers and our local elected and state officials about what we can do to help manage through this and how we can provide support for these men and women during the course of these challenging times. Obviously, you can see the damage behind us. A week ago, that field was being irrigated. A couple days ago, the water was up to where the box truck is by that barn. In February, we had 50-degree weather, and the next day we had minus 10-degree weather. In May, we had sub-freezing for many hours across the state. In June, we had droughts, and in July, we have floods. These challenges are becoming harder and harder for Connecticut's farmers to deal with and to manage through. So we have at the department, working with the team across the administration, a couple of tools that we'll be releasing to work with Connecticut farmers to make sure that if we have to go through these sorts of events again in a year, they are better able to manage them. A couple of people that I want to acknowledge that are behind us here: Catherine Marks from the Small Business Administration, Paul Larson from the Connecticut Farm Bureau, Emily Cole from the Farm Service Agency, Chris Loughton from Farm Credit East. We have the Ag Experiment Station, we have the Council of Governments, we have Yukon Extension, all here to demonstrate support and acknowledge that we will be working together in an effort to support farmers through this. Farmers invest heavily on the front end of the season. They invest in their staff, they invest in their fuel, they invest in their equipment, they invest in seeds, they prepare the grounds. This is the time when they would be recovering that investment, that they'd be selling things at the markets, at their stands, through their wholesale outlets. And obviously, they won't be able to do that. So there's a challenge with revenue flow, there's a challenge with paying their loans back that we're going to try to help them address. So a couple of things that we're going to be doing in order to support them through this. The first is we're asking all farmers that were impacted, whether it be through the floods or from the rain events last week and over the weekend, to report your losses. Call your USDA Farm Service Agency, report your losses. Use the online tool that we at the department have created to submit those losses. Once we have an estimate about what the damage is, the total acres and dollars, then we'll be able to submit that disaster declaration. I will say that every year that I've been commissioner, we've had to submit a disaster declaration request down to Secretary Vilsack. Unfortunately, this year, we're going to have to submit 2 disaster declarations down to the Secretary. And I think that is highlights the challenge that we've seen this year. The department also has climate smart and farmland restoration bonding that will be available. So we'll be able to help farms bring that land back, put in the different infrastructure that they need to help balance out some of their revenue streams across the seasons and manage to the best of our ability these major events. We have a number of people that will be part of a working group that will help design this program, and we're hoping that will be ready for the next bond council. We've set up a disaster website, a one-stop shop for farmers to go to see what resources are available, whether it be through us at the Department of Agriculture, through our sister agencies at the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection, Department of Economic and Community Development, USDA, Yukon Extension, what have you, but making it easy for people to get the information that they need. We're creating a marketplace. Some farms that are impacted need to buy some product in order to support their stands. They need to buy some plants and crops to put in the fields that they do have available to salvage this season. Creating a space for them to make those connections and to buy that product will allow them to keep revenue moving through their farms and keep their staff on. We also will be setting up business support one-on-one time, traveling across the state to be available near the farms so that farmers can come and sit with us one-on-one and talk about what challenges they have, and we'll help navigate. I'm doing kind of a one-on-one concierge service to make sure that they know what programs are there. Not everybody wants to spend a couple hours navigating websites and filling out forms. We'll help them figure out what the best program is for their needs and get them to there. We're also working with them about food safety. If the river water touched the crop is not going to be harvested. So we need Connecticut consumers to know that the food that you're buying at farmers markets and farm stands is safe. The food that has been potentially contaminated will be harrowed into the ground and will not make it to the market. So that's really important. We're working with farmers to make sure they understand their responsibilities, but we want Connecticut consumers to know that when they buy that fresh ear of sweet corn, that it is safe to consume. And the last thing that we've put together is a farmer stress relief program. These are really challenging times. As I went through, the number of events concurrently and aggregate create a lot of stress on the farm for farm workers and for the men and women who own these businesses. And we have a hotline, 833-897-2474, that farmers and farm workers can call, text, and have a conversation about the challenges they're going through and help manage that. For people who don't want to call or text and just want to do a little homework on their own, ctfarmstressrelief.com is a website with a lot of different resources and videos that people can use to help manage some of the anxiety that they may be facing right now. And we think it's really important that we have these tools available for them to get through this year, because we know how important it is that these farmers are working the lands next year. We've got a number of legislators here. I want to call up Representative Berry and Representative Foster if they have a couple things to share. I see Representative Foster. Representative Berry, come on up.
I want to thank everyone for being here today. We worked really hard at the end of this session to find ways that we could make efforts to support farmers after a lot of folks faced catastrophic losses. We also worked really hard trying to find ways to preserve open farmland and space. And in communities like ours, that's a constant struggle where people are upset when they see farmlands leaving for development and for solar arrays. But they have to understand that seasons like this are the reasons why it's getting harder year after year for farmers to stay in business. It's why land is sold. So what I want to ask today is for people to listen and understand what farmers are feeling and experiencing and the tremendous stress that they're under, and support your local farm. It might look different this year than it has in years past. When you go to do pick your own, it might not be the same as it's been in the years past, but do it anyways. Support your local farm. Make sure that they can stay in business. Make sure the farmers know that you're with them and you know how hard they're working and you want them in your community, that they're a valuable part of what they're going through and you understand. And so my message really is for those of you who are not farmers to understand how hard this is. Make sure you pick your own. Make sure you shop local. Sometimes you're spending a little more, but it's better for the environment and it's better for your community, for your food to be coming locally. It's good for your local food security. So shop local and support your farms as they're going through this hard time, and always. Thanks.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. I'm Jill Berry, State Representative for Glastonbury. Thank you all for being here. This is truly what community is about. Our farms are so much more than the crops they produce and the CSA shares that they do. They are our community. Whether it's farm to table dinners or haunted hay rides, you are here for us 12 months a year. And I just want to say thank you, and thank you to our community, and I am happy to be a resource for the Glastonbury farmers to get you through this process. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, representatives, and for your time and attention to this matter. Next up, we have our host, Chris Bassett, who is here. This is the second time she's taken time out of her day in the past week to share her story with us at the department, and obviously a greater audience today. So, Chris.
I, too, want to thank everybody for being here today. I'd like to stress to our customers and to other farmers' customers to be sympathetic. When you go into those farm stands and farmers markets, we're doing the best we can to provide the freshest product for you, and this is what we're dealing with. So the prices might be a little bit higher because we are not producing as much as we normally do, but also remember, all your farmers, don't go to the grocery stores. Come and see us and help us get through this, because we don't know what we're going to get from all this today, but hopefully it'll be some help. But the detriment is huge, and it goes on for years for us. We are still in debt from 2017, 2011. There were other issues that went on, and it takes years for us to get total recoup from that. So all our customers have been so understanding and so supportive of what we've got going on, and we as farmers all work together It's not a dog-eat-dog world out there. And as you can tell, you'll see all the farmers who are here today that we all came together because we help each other. So just keep supporting us and keep doing what you're doing and just understand what we're going through. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Next up we have, yeah, that's absolutely appropriate. Across the river, we have a significant amount of farmland that's underwater as well. To share their story, we have Kate and Billy Collins from Fairweather Farms here to talk about what they've experienced. And they've got a great visual of what their land looks like when it's not flooded. And I think people have seen some of the drone footage that has been shared out of what it looks like now that it has been flooded.
Hi. I had written a Facebook post on the farm page a few days ago, and it was talked about the amazing network and farming community that the state of Connecticut has. It talked about the numerous phone calls and texts that Billy has gotten over the past week, checking in with him and asking if there was any way they can help. The phone calls and texts were also about lending extra equipment, labor, and even land so we could finish out our growing season and not just call it quits. We were blown away. We were blown away not only by the generosity and camaraderie, but by the selflessness of the Connecticut farmers. Every farmer across the United States is struggling in some way, but they still reach out to help. It's a farmer's code. We are grateful to be surrounded by the best. I read a quote in a farming magazine last year, and it said, "Farming looks mighty easy when your plow is a pencil and you're 1,000 miles away from the cornfield." That has never rung so true as it does today. The farmers across the state have come together on their own to help each other out of this mess, and we hope that our commissioner and our governor can do the same. We were grateful to the Commissioner of Ag for meeting with us last Wednesday and listening to our concerns, but hope that this is just not another media opportunity. This is our livelihood that is at stake. Fairweather Growers is going to lose about 300 acres of crops and more than half of our labor force, plus all of our wholesale accounts. The flood just doesn't affect us. It affects all the farmers who are farming along the rivers. We are asking for financial help from the state and government in forms other than low-interest loans. This assistance will help us all repay our growing costs and make it possible for us to continue farming next year. It will help keep our labor here in Connecticut and not going down south. And mentally, it will give the farmers a second to take a breath and know that our elected government officials have their backs and are rooting for a future in Connecticut agriculture. So these pictures are, this is before the flood. This was taken yesterday, and just the devastation that happened in one of the green bean fields. And this is a before of years ago of the meadows, and it's completely underwater right now. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Rocky Hill.
Importantly, Billy and Kate not only provide food for their community at the farm stand and wholesale markets, but they sell to Connecticut Food Share and provide food for families in need across the state. So their impact amplifies throughout a lot of different aspects of Connecticut. The next speaker we have is my colleague, Commissioner Katie Dykes. I spoke with her Saturday morning, and sometimes sister agencies can have, sibling squalls, but Katie said, what can we do? Let's talk through this. How can we help? Let me see what we have available at DEEP to leverage here. And that sort of camaraderie and teamwork and understanding of the challenge that we're facing across the state is really remarkable, and I'm very appreciative that she's able to join us today and help out. So, Commissioner Dykes.
Thank you so much, Brian. It's great to be here. I'm Katie Dykes, the Commissioner at the Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection. I think it goes without saying, just in hearing Commissioner Holbrook talk about all of the different challenges the diverse challenges that our farms have been experiencing just this year, just this season, that climate change impacts are accelerating, and we have to have the right kind of funding and investments and support for our farmers in order to ensure we can be more resilient to these accelerating impacts going forward. That includes extreme rainfall events. It includes drought and dry periods. It includes late spring frosts that are unprecedented. And we're really fortunate here in Connecticut that we've been leaning into planning and investment in climate resilience. Commissioner Hilbert and I worked together with a whole working group in the Governor's Council on Climate Change to develop lots of different ideas for things we can do to improve resilience on our farms, and so that gives us a base to work with. We have a deep climate resilience planning grant program with bond funding that we're going to be looking at to see how we can support climate resilience grants that could enhance resilience for local farms. And so we're excited to be part of the working group that Commissioner Hilbert mentioned to see how we can bring those tools to bear, and obviously we'll be working closely with our legislative partners on that as well. And just pulling back the lens a bit, of course, these flooding events and the rainfall that we've been experiencing over the last few days and weeks are stressing lots of communities across the state. Just a few weeks ago, we were in the north end of Hartford to talk about urban flooding. We have the impact to agriculture, and we've seen how this has affected lots of states in the region. Just a few weeks ago, DEEP announced $8.8 million of climate planning resilience grants, and we're going to be supporting lots of different municipalities and communities that are looking at both gray and green infrastructure solutions that they can implement to help mitigate some of that flooding. Every drop counts, so the more that we can store some of that rainwater, in the ground in our urban and suburban areas, the less is going into these channels that are impacting some of our communities, some of our agricultural lands. So we know we're really excited about some of those projects. And what part of the key of how we're doing that is to support with these dollars planning and actually hiring the grant writers who can write the grant applications to the federal government to unlock federal funds that we can match with our state dollars. There's a lot of resources in Washington, and we're working hard with these dollars not only to help support investments here at the state level, but also to unlock as much of that federal money as we possibly can to help address some of these challenges. So we're really glad to be part of this event, and we're moving forward working together on more things that we can do to support our resilience, especially for agriculture here in the state.
Thank you, Katie. And next up we have Jason Kopowski, CEO of FoodShare. Just about, I think it was 6 weeks ago, we were celebrating that FoodShare purchased 1 million pounds of Connecticut-grown produce, milk, meats from across the state to support their efforts. They're a major buyer of Connecticut products and a great partner in an effort to support the Connecticut agricultural economy. So Jason's got a couple words to share how this will impact FoodShare and their plans.
Thank you, Commissioner. We're here for two reasons. I mean, first and foremost, to support our Connecticut farmers. And Chris was explaining to me that this was all the way up there. And that's just horrifying. And that's it's tragic, and it has a direct impact on your businesses. And Connecticut's farmers are always there for us at Connecticut FoodShare, and we want to do what we can to help support them. The second reason, though, is that we have to remember that in addition to these being businesses, there is an end user in all of this, and those are the individuals that consume food on a daily basis. Whether they're buying it at a farm stand, whether they're buying it at a local market, or whether they're getting it from us at Connecticut FoodShare. As the Commissioner said a couple weeks ago, we had the Deputy Secretary of Agriculture up here to celebrate us buying 1 million pounds of food from Connecticut farmers through the LFPA, through the federal LFPA program. That's a win-win, because it allows us to be able to help our farmers by infusing cash into their business, but it also allows us to be able to take fresh product and deliver it directly to our 500 plus pantries across the state of Connecticut. Just because somebody is food insecure and just because they're poor doesn't mean that they don't deserve the best grown food out there. And that's what this program is about. The devastation that has happened to a number of these farms is going to affect that program. So yes, it affects the farms, but it also affects the individuals that are going to benefit from the produce and the crops that come out of those farms. And one of the things we're doing is we're regrouping and trying to figure out how are we going to continue to be able to provide our pantries and the 400,000 people in Connecticut who are food insecure with fresh produce when that amount of produce available has been shrunk by this unfortunate natural disaster. We're doing our best, and we will continue to do our best to support Connecticut's farmers and anything that we can in order to help put fresh produce in the plates and on the tables of those who are food insecure in Connecticut. So, Commissioner, with us, you continue to have a partner, and we're appreciative to you and your agency for all of their efforts in trying to get us back on track. But thank you very much.
Thank you, Jason. Next up, we have two members of our congressional delegation, and I will say both of them have spent a considerable amount of time paying attention to Connecticut agriculture. Importantly, 2023 is a Farm Bill year. And for those of you who don't pay as much attention to what a Farm Bill is for the U.S. economy, it is a piece of legislation that's written every 5 years that details your risk management programs, your crop insurance programs, your support programs, your conservation programs. It is one of the most important pieces of legislation that happens on a 5-year basis. And for us in Connecticut, it's critically important that this conversation ends with tools that work for Connecticut farmers. So first up, we have Senator Blumenthal to share a few words.
Thanks, Brian. Thank you to Commissioner Hurlburt for his great work, to all of your team who receive a lot less credit than they deserve. Thanks to Commissioner Dykes. Thank you to the governor for bringing us together today, and all of our colleagues. Most of all, thank you to the farmers who are here today. Chris and all of you, I've met with many of you over these past years. A year ago, because of the drought, just last May, because of the freeze, now because of the floods. Farming is one of the hardest businesses in the whole world because the weather plays havoc with the best of plans. Farmers are the ultimate risk takers. They put money in the ground and they hope against experience that the weather will be great. And often they're betrayed through no fault of their own. What's going to happen today? We're all thinking beautiful weather. Well, the sun and the heat are going to cook these fields. They are literally going to cook these crops before they're harvested. The water will reach 70, 80 degrees in this sunlight and heat and make whatever crops might have been harvested even more difficult to do. So this disaster is one that demands our attention. It's not just a Connecticut disaster, it's a regional one, and it will affect the entire supply chain for our region and perhaps our country. And Connecticut can do something. And most important, the federal government can do something. The importance of this information that's being collected can't be understated, can't be overstated. The importance of this information is that it enables the governor to do a disaster declaration. And I can pledge to you, I know our entire delegation is united on this point, we will fight and fight like we did for past disaster declarations, and we will win. And I know we will win because we have won before. Just months ago, in the wake of the freeze in May, we won a disaster declaration for virtually the entire state, all of our counties except Fairfield County. We can do it again. And that enables low-interest loans. The SBA is represented here by Catherine Marks, other kinds of aid that is important to these farmers. But they should not have to bear the risk of insurance programs that they have to pay for and now get inadequate returns on. Let's just be very blunt. That crop insurance fails, utterly fails, to provide adequate compensation as it is now structured. We have the opportunity in this Farm Bill to do better, but even before then, we can reform this program so as to provide more aid for smaller farms that grow more crops. In the Northeast, we know many of the produce farms will grow strawberries, peaches, apples, corn, multiple crops, not like the big mega farms out in the Midwest that just grow corn or they just grow wheat. The crop insurance program was designed for them, not for us. We need to reform it. So we are going to work and fight in this farm bill to make the crop insurance program better and fairer. We owe it to ourselves. People take for granted that there's going to be affordable produce on their table. We can't take it for granted. Droughts, frosts, flooding. We need to be mindful. We're all in this together. And let me just say one last point to the shortage of food. This nation wastes more food than a lot of nations consume. 40% of all food in the United States of America is literally wasted. And we complain a lot about the supply chain, but we also need to work to make our nation more resilient and resolute on climate change, on food waste, on preserving open space, because ultimately our farmers are the ones, they are among the most faithful to open space programs and preserving a great culture and a great heritage. My grandfather raised corn and cattle on a farm just south of Omaha, Nebraska. He went through good times, he went through bad times before eras of insurance. And I think all of us, many of us at least, can trace parts of our families back to farms, which are part of the great American culture and the source of our economic strength all around the world. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator. Next up, we have Congressman Larson, who has been on the phone with me personally a number of times over the past week, asking for guidance and information about how the USDA programs work, what we can do, and how he can use his position in D.C. as a member of Congress to work in support of our farmers. So, Congressman Larson.
Thank you, Commissioner, and thank you, Governor. We deeply appreciate knowing, first and foremost, that in the state of Connecticut, the first congressional district along the Connecticut River is the district that's been hardest hit by this flooding. We also know in retrospect that starting in Vermont and working its way all the way down the Connecticut River, the devastation that has occurred because of disasters like this. And speaking of hands-on, Commissioner, thank you for the calls and getting out there and talking to people directly and making us aware of what we have to do as a delegation. I'm extraordinarily proud of our delegation because, as Dick pointed out, we worked together. The word was used a couple of times today, resiliency. Nobody epitomizes resilience more than farmers. My next door neighbor is DJ Burnham, who's standing back there. His family has been farming the same piece of property along the Connecticut River since the 1640s. I believe, Governor, I don't have an official statement, I believe that makes them probably the, or one of the longest continuous serving farms in Connecticut, New England, and I dare say the country as well. You talk about resiliency, and yet they lost more than 160 acres to flooding. I could see it outside of my window where I've been their neighbor for 44 years. There is no harder working family, and you see the work, the dedication that goes into farming that somehow we kind of celebrate as a romantic way of life in so many respects, but has been laid out today. The difficulty of the task, how hard it is, the risk that's involved from planting a seed to ultimate harvest. This demands our help. As Senator Blumenthal pointed out, the laws of the state need to be reformed, but let's start now by amending the agriculture bill to make sure that relief goes to farmers who just aren't necessarily as big as the state of Iowa, but have different kinds of farming needs that we need to make sure, and we've emphasized this with Secretary Vilsack and people in the Department of Agriculture. I spoke with Rosa DeLauro directly, and as you all know, who's on appropriations and leads that for the Democrats. We have Chris Murphy in the Senate on appropriations. We're going to make sure that ag appropriations gets amended so that we can help you out. Now, that doesn't help you immediately as of today, but it does demonstrate, as the commissioner has suggested, that we've got to stay together and continue to look at this business model and see how we as the federal government, as we do with all other states and other regions and other businesses, make sure that one of the most essential businesses on so many fronts stays vibrant and well. It breaks my heart when I hear about people saying, I don't know if we can continue this. I don't know how much longer we can go on with this. We've got to, as a state and as a country, prioritize just how singularly important this is from our very beginnings to today. So again, Commissioner, compliments to you. Governor, thank you for putting this together. We're working with you directly to make sure that we put every ounce of not only pressure, but specific legislation that's good for Connecticut, New England, the Northeast region, so that because to recognize that our farming interests are different than other parts of the nation, but no less in need. Thank you.
Thank you. Our final program speaker is Governor Lamont. The governor's paid a tremendous amount of attention to agriculture during the course of his first and now second administration, and he called and said, what are we going to do? How are we going to help? This looks pretty bad. Give me the details. And it's tremendous to have a governor who is thinking that much about Connecticut's farmers and trying to use the levers that we have in state government to release tools for support. So Governor Lamont.
Thanks, Brian. Just hearing these stories, what the hell is going on here? We've got firefighters going up to Nova Scotia over the last month, putting out, helping to put out the blazes there. We saw the effects of that in terms of the haze and smog and smoke. We've got rescue boats going up to Montpelier and Ludlow, Vermont, trying to rescue folks there that haven't seen a flood like that in many a year. Listening to Brian, look behind us. We were irrigating that a couple of months ago, desperate for water, in the middle of a drought. And today it's Lake Wobegon. And so what do you do? I mean, I appreciate John and Dick and our incredible delegation to get the rules changed down in Washington so that our small farms right here in the Northeast, right here in Connecticut, we're able to stand up for you, get you the grants and support you need. They've done a lot in terms of infrastructure and resilience. What does resilience mean? That's the grants that Katie Dykes and Deep are putting out there so that we just don't go back to where we were before and hope the next storm is not as bad as the last storm. See what we can do to mitigate some of the damage for farms just like this. I'm struck by Fairweather Acres. What an ironic name. And no profession is more subject to the whims of Mother Nature than what each and every one of you do. I want to say to our farmers in particular, we love you. And we needed you more than ever during COVID. And Jason and I were there. Thank God we had food grown right here, Connecticut fresh food, and what that meant. And we got to do everything. Yeah, exactly. These farms go back hundreds and hundreds of years. They are the heart and soul of what made Connecticut special. This Connecticut River Valley, it's in the floodplain, a little bit at risk. Also some of the best agricultural land, there is. And one last thing, what can we do now? How can we help people now? And Brian is right. I've been on the horn with everybody saying, that's great. I like planning and I like legislation, but what can we do now? And we do have a program in place. It's called Boost. And the Boost Fund is about $150 million. The Boost Fund goes out to help small businesses get back on their feet and grow and expand. And that's under our DECD and Alexandra Daum and You know, these storms that are hitting us are biblical in proportion. So I told Alexandra, let's get a 1-800 number, 1-800-NOAH. How about that? And see if we can get you a direct line so we can provide help where you need it now. I know that's a short-term solution. It's not everything you want. It's low-interest loans. It's not an outright grant. But it's a way that we can provide a little bit of relief right now, a lifeboat when you need a lifeboat. And then longer term, we're making the changes to do what we can to make sure this doesn't happen the same severity and frequency it has over the last 10 years. God bless you all.
Thank you, Governor. I know you're busy collecting data, but are there any preliminary damage estimates? And can you also give us a sense of the size of agricultural industry in Connecticut?
Yep. So the Connecticut ag economy is made up of 5,500 small farms across the state, very similar to the one we're at today. It employs 22,000 people that are now worried about where their paychecks will be coming from, and generates $4 billion to the state's economy. While we're here on land, I also want to acknowledge that we have 70,000 acres of oyster beds down in Long Island Sound, a really important piece of our Connecticut economy. Our initial estimates, just kind of back of the envelope calculations, is that there's about 2,000 acres that have been impacted. We want to get a much more solid number, which is why we're asking for farms to fill out the survey so we can put in the disaster declaration request. But it's going to be millions of dollars of product that's lost.
Roughly what percentage of farms in floodplains, do you know?
That's a great question. I don't have an answer to that one.
The relief program you were saying you were working on and hope to have before the State Bond Commission, is that going to be more low-interest loans, or is that going to be sort of grants?
It's going to be a grant program for farmland restoration to help keep crops where they need to be when we have these rain events, keep the soil where it is, put more land back into production, climate resiliency planning grants so that farmers can work with a consultant or Yukon Extension or the Ag Experiment Station, Farm Credit East, to figure out how they can better prepare for this if they need to move crops or grow a different crop, and then infrastructure. We've Don Preli's here from Belltown Hill, the frost freeze event just up the road that we had in May. He's got windmills on his farm. And by moving the air, he was able to prevent some of the frost from settling on his orchard. So we'll have funds available to help farmers purchase equipment like that.
What type of, do you have a dollar amount in mind?
We've got $7 million available in this program.
And approximately how many farms, the Congressman mentioned the first district, obviously, would you say it's overly concentrated in the first district? Yeah. How many farms are similar to what we're seeing here?
I don't have an exact number, which is why we need that assessment filled out. And the river valley flooding last week was predominantly in this neck of the woods. The rain that we received over the weekend, we heard from farms across the state that were hit pretty bad, streams and rivers that went over their and flooded their fields. So that's part of the assessment. Is not only the river flooding, but also that rain event.
Governor, could you give us an idea of what other damage we're seeing? Obviously, there's been some roads washed out. What other reports have been coming to your office and your people?
Look, it hits every piece of our state. We have the stormwater issues in North Hartford, and right after announcing we're going to get that rebuilt, they had more flooding and more damage there. I was in Bristol yesterday afternoon, where our bridge was totally washed out, first time since 1955. This is not the first time we've had floods, but they're more frequent, more severe. 2,000 acres of farmland, a lot of folks struggling just to keep their head above water. It's all over.
Commissioner Dykes, what about at state parks? What sort of damage, if any, we've seen in our parks?
I think some of our response in the parks has really mostly been focused on some of our boat launches, where we've seen, had to do some closures associated with flooding. But so far, we haven't had any interruption to our services at the parks associated.
What about swimming? Obviously, when it have these big flooding events, it's not always safe to go back in the water for a while.
Sure. Yeah, we're doing regular testing around safety for all of our inland and beach locations. And I know our team is here that we can provide you some of those updates, but those are going out on a regular basis.
Yeah, weekly water.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
I think there's been a lot of damage to roads, Paul, as you probably
Yeah.
know, in the northwestern part of the state. I'm going up to Colebrook and Goshen and Norfolk today. I'm told Route 272 is still impassable. Some of the local roads in that area have been washed out, so there's also damage to transportation.
Yep. I will say we have been urging everyone, as these floodwaters are receding, this is not a time to go into elevated streams, for swimming and that sort of thing. So just being really careful about swimming, in some of these impacted waterways. And then Bristol was mentioned, so I just wanted to note there that, the Climate Resilience Planning Grant Program that we announced 2 weeks ago, $8.8 million, we're distributing to a variety of different municipalities and COGs. Bristol is one of the recipients, so $250,000 grant is going to assist the town in developing a flood resilience plan for areas along and near the Pequabic River and Coppermine Brook to assess how to restore the floodways function. So that's just an example of, how these resilience funding grants are a down payment on helping communities like Bristol that were impacted to be better protected going forward.
Kayakers and canoers, I imagine if there's some white water.
That's really, exactly. We've seen some tragedies in the past of folks, attracted to dams and kayaking and that sort of thing. Just be really careful. We've been putting out some press releases to remind folks about water safety during these times.
Are there any dams that are under watch as a result of this?
Graham Stevens, do you want to speak to that? We've been monitoring over the weekend.
So the state of Connecticut...
Come to the mics.
Oh, sorry.
Tell them who you are.
Hi folks, I'm Graham Stevens. I'm with Connecticut Deep. And with respect to dams, the state of Connecticut is monitoring its suite of dams across the state. We own many dams. We also own flood control systems that try to protect our urban areas from flooding. And we monitor the dams during any of these storms to ensure their safety. If there's an issue with respect to their safety, we coordinate with our emergency management personnel to go out during the flood situation and assess those dams and take appropriate action.
But so far you've only had to monitor. You have not had to take any direct action yet?
Correct. We had a couple of dams that we had some slight concerns over during this last event. We partnered with Beacon Falls and Seymour emergency management personnel to ensure that those dams were safe.
What dams are those?
So those are a series of dams that the names of which I can provide you.
Okay, but it's like along the...
On what waterways, perhaps?
I'll have to get that for you. Sorry.
Governor Lamont, quick question. I know we're seeing mass damage across the state. Any area that you've seen that has been hit the hardest, and any idea of the cost that damage is going to be repaired?
Well, like Senator Blumenthal said, northwest Connecticut, northeast Connecticut hit particularly hard. You see a lot of that related to bridges and transportation. It's going to be in the many millions of dollars. Some of that we'll get some federal reimbursement for, but let's not worry about that right now. Our state DOT is there right next to Public Works, getting those roads and bridges back up. Bristol's up.
Before we close here, I just want to acknowledge we have a number of other state legislators that were able to join us. Representative Doucette, Representative Ware, Representative Wood, and Senator Rahman, all who have had constituents that have been impacted, have been in touch with our office trying to figure out ways to support. Thank you all again for joining us today. Appreciate the time and attention to this, and I believe the governor and I have another stop to get to before he heads back into Hartford. So thank you. No, all mixed vegetables, some sweet corn.